So we're going to talk about basic operations, operations being adding, subtracting, multiplying, and I guess we'll hit on dividing a little bit too. So when we add, I like to think about situations happening to you with money as you're walking down the hallway. And so when we talk about adding, you can think about walking or a positive number. When we talk about adding with a positive number, you can think about a positive number as money you have in your pocket, or you're walking down the hallway and you find $5 that's not attached to anyone. No one's around it, so you can pick it up. Think of a negative number as you're walking down the hallway and someone bumps into you and says, "Hey, remember I bought you lunch the other day? You still owe me $10. That would be a negative 10 for you. So positive is money that you have in your pocket or you get. Negative is money that you owe someone. So when you add positives together, you get a bigger positive, such as like 4 plus 3. You have $4, you have $3 also. That means you put them together, you have $7. Adding negatives results in a bigger negative. So say we have negative 5 plus, because we're adding in this section right now, negative 2. So you owe someone $5 and plus you owe someone else $2. Well, that means you owe a total of $7. So the next $7 you find or you earn goes to them. You don't actually get to keep that. Now, when you add one positive and one negative number together, you could have a positive answer or a negative answer. And the question you got to ask yourself when you're adding one positive and one negative number is the positive bigger or is the negative bigger? It's kind of like, I think of it as a tug of war or a battle versus getting to keep your money or versus owing somebody money. And whichever is bigger, positive meaning that you get to keep it, or negative meaning that and it's yours, and negative meaning that you owe someone money, whichever one's bigger or farther from zero, that's going to be which one wins out, and that'll be the sign of your answer. That'll be the sign, and then the number after the positive or negative sign will be whatever the difference is between the two numbers. All right, so let's actually try this. Let's say 4 plus negative 7. So I'm adding a positive and a negative. So which one's bigger or farther from 0? Negative 7 is farther from 0 than 4. So my answer is going to be negative. Now what's the difference between 4 and 7? It's 3. So the answer is negative 3. If you don't like that shortcut way of doing it, thinking about walking down the hallway with $4 in your pocket, because that's a positive 4. So that's awesome. You're excited about that. You could maybe buy lunch with that. But then someone walks up to you and says, "Hey, dude, you owe me $7. Well, you should pay them back right away. So you should give them the $4 that you have in your pocket, but that's not enough to pay them back. You still owe them $3. And because you owe them, it's a negative 3. Let's try one more like that. So let's do negative, I don't know why I keep doing sevens, negative 7 plus 10. So here we're adding, one number's negative, one number's positive, so it's kind of like a battle royale or tug of war. I notice that the positive number is bigger, meaning the money that I have in my pocket is more than what I owe someone. So the answer is going to be positive. So the answer is going to be positive. You don't actually need to put a plus sign down. In fact, you technically shouldn't do this, but I'm going to do it. It's not the end of the world. What's the difference between 10 and 7? It's 3. So the answer is a positive 3. Another way to think about it is someone's like, "Hey, you owe me $7. You're like, "Oh, thankfully I have $10 in my pocket." So you give them $7. You still have $3 in your pocket. And because it's money that you have in your pocket, that's yours, it's positive. Subtraction. So there's addition. Hopefully that made sense. You refer back to the slide if you need to ever, or your notes. Subtracting, we want to turn into addition. It's the same as adding the opposite. Subtracting is also adding the opposite. If you've heard of the phrase chop chop or chop slash, that's also the same as adding the opposite. It's just a different way of going about it. Most middle school students that I see their teachers have used the phrase keep, switch, flip, and it seems to work. So we're going to go with that. Now keep means, let's make a problem up real quick. 4 minus negative 2. That one looks confusing. Ooh, what is 4 minus negative 2? But if we do keep, switch, flip, it's going to make it really easy. So we keep the first number as it is. So 4 stays 4. We switch the subtraction sign to addition. Here's the minus sign. I'm going to make it addition. Flip the sign of the second number. Sign means positive or negative. And the second number is a negative. It's a negative 2. So I'm going to switch it to the opposite, or flip it. It's now going to become a positive 2. For those of you who have heard the phrase chop chop, we make the 2 marks in between the numbers, and those are your 2 marks. So if I reread this problem, it's actually just 4 plus 2. That's 6. That's an easy problem once we switch subtracting to adding the opposite. Let's do another one. Negative 5 minus 2. We keep the first number as it is. So this negative 5 stays negative 5. We switch the subtraction sign to addition, and we flip the sign of the second number. This second number right here is a positive 2 because there's not a negative sign up there. But we need to flip the sign of the second number. The second number originally was positive. We now need to make it negative. So we have negative 5 plus negative 2. I owe someone $5 and I owe someone $2. So that's a negative 7. If you were to type in what I originally had written down here, negative 5 minus 2 in a calculator, let's remove both of those. This is what I had originally. It would say negative 7. That's the answer. But if we keep, switch, flip, it makes doing the mental math or the conceptual math that much easier. Let's do one last one. Negative 8 minus negative 5. So keep the first number as it is. Negative 8 stays negative 8. Switch the subtraction sign to addition. Flip the sign of the second number. So negative 5 goes to positive 5. Now I'm adding, and so I owe someone $8. That stinks. And I have a positive $5. I have $5 in my pocket. So I give them the $5. I still owe them $3 because I owe them. It's negative. Other side of your paper talks about multiplication. Here's your times table. If you don't know these, it'd be good for you to memorize them. Then we're not just going to talk about multiplying positive numbers, but also negative numbers. And so if we take a positive number times a negative number, or a negative number times a positive number. In other words, if the two numbers we're multiplying together are opposites, one's positive, one's negative, it's going to be a negative value. Whereas a positive times a positive is a positive, and a negative times a negative is a positive. So the one thing that happens here is people confuse the multiplication rules with what we were just doing on the previous page with adding and subtracting. It's only multiplication where a negative and a negative makes a positive. And division, but not addition and subtraction. So another way to think of this, folks, is not that we want to judge people, but if you watch a movie makes it very clear who are the good guys and the bad guys. And so some people say when this is a positive, so when good things happen to bad people, that's bad. And when bad things happen to good things, good people, that's bad as well. Like, it's not what you're pulling for in the movie. You don't want a good thing to happen to the bad guy, and you don't want a bad thing to happen to the good guy. So that's a negative feeling in a movie. That's a way to memorize this multiplication shortcut. Good things happen to good people, that's a good thing. In the movies, when a bad thing happens to a bad person, you are usually celebrating that. These rules are the same for division, folks. We're not going to do a ton of dividing here, but really dividing is like backwards multiplication. I'll show you what that means in a minute. So down below here I have some multiplication practice. And so if we do that, let me zoom in a little bit more. Like here we have a positive times a positive, so 4 times 5 is 20. Notice this whole row is 4 times 5 basically, except for here, one's positive, one's negative. So that gives me a negative 20. Same thing right here, we get a negative 20. And then negative 4 times negative 5 is a negative times a negative, so that's a positive 20. Negative times a negative is a positive, and 2 times 3 is 6. Here the signs don't match, so it's a negative. Here we have two negatives, meaning the signs match, or a bad thing happens to a bad person. That's good in a movie. So it's a positive 6. This is also a positive 6. I'm going to skip to the bottom row. Realize, folks, that this means multiplication as well. That's 5 times negative 3, so it's a negative 15, negative 15. Negative 3 times negative 5, that's a positive 15, and that's a negative 15. We will actually also use a dot. So this also means a multiplication. Lastly, division, folks. If I ask what's 56 divided by negative 7, negative 7, you could think to yourself, negative 7 times what equals 56? Well, a negative times a negative gives you the positive, and it needs to be an 8. So 56 divided by negative 7 is also negative 8. You can check division with multiplication, or honestly, in my mind, I just like to do multiplication instead. I ask myself, what times this gives me that first value?